Number 3. Well, here's one that comes up. The Trinity, the Christian doctrine of Trinity, is logically incoherent. It doesn't make sense. It's self-contradictory. Therefore, it cannot be true. So, according to this claim, the Trinity claim of Christianity is that there's one God plus one God plus one God equals one God. 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 1. One God equals 3 gods. Okay, well, that is certainly mathematically false, right? So, why is this a bad argument? I mean, it seems pretty good to me. It's math, right? So you're saying that this does not accurately represent what Christians believe. Do you know what the name of that fallacy is when you're not representing somebody else's view accurately? I may have already used the term this morning. No, not false analogy. When you misrepresent somebody else's view so that you can more easily defeat it. Straw man. Exactly right. This is the straw man fallacy.
Folks, I don't believe that there is any rational explanation for the Trinity. Recently, I studied parts of a book written by Moreland and Craig on the philosophical foundations for a Christian worldview. And their discussion of the Trinity does not leave me with a greater appreciation for the doctrine. It just shows that how many difficulties there are in that doctrine. So Jesus is a mind. The Holy Spirit has a mind, obviously, according to Samuel's presentation. The Father has a mind, so you have 3 minds. When we speak about the mind behind the universe, if we talk about a single mind, then we mean that there is only one God. If you're talking about 3 minds, it looks like you have 3 gods. So how do you explain that you do not actually have 3 gods while you're still proclaiming that there is only one God? The simple thing is to say that there is only one God and stop right there. That's what the Quran advises you to do. Thank you very much.
Here's another former Muslim, Nabil Qureshi, who, in God's providence, died this past year of stomach cancer. But had a remarkable tour while he was with us. He wrote a book called Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, which I would heartily commend to you. And it chronicles his conversion from being a devout Muslim apologist to realizing that his arguments in favor of Islam did not measure up at all to the arguments in favor of Christianity. And one of the reasons I like the book is not just because of the apologetics, but because it gives such a warm, sympathetic picture of what it's like to grow up in a devout Muslim family. It really puts a human face on Islam and what his experience was growing up in that kind of a family in America. His family was from Pakistan. So, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. If you're inclined to read these things and interested in the topic, I'd suggest it. But Nabil now is going to address that particular issue.
And now I start investigating questions like, can the Trinity be viable? What does it mean to be 3 in 1 and 1 in 3? Does that make any sense at all? And at this point, this is the summer of 2003, David and I are taking organic chemistry together. If you can avoid organic chemistry, I would suggest it. No, it was great. It was wonderful. So we're taking organic chemistry together. And basically what happens in organic chemistry is you've come out of basic chemistry, your Gen Chem, and then they say, hey, all that stuff we taught you with Gen Chem, forget about it. Now we got organic chem. And so we're relearning everything. How many of you guys have taken any chemistry at all? Most of you. Okay. So you know everything's made up of atoms, all right? Each atom has multiple parts. You got a nucleus made of a proton and a neutron. You got electrons floating around it. Amens? Let's get amens. Amens on chemistry. Yes, I made you do it. Okay, so we then have multiple nuclei that come together, and those electrons are shared between electron clouds, right? These are now called molecules, okay? They're called molecules. When you have multiple nuclei coming together to form one thing, it's called a molecule. Sometimes you have those electrons hanging out in one area, and then all of a sudden they flip to another area because of the polarity and such. When that happens, you have multiple resonance structures. Resonance structures, okay? So basically all that was to define resonance structures for you. Here's what my professor said. I'll still remember her saying it. I mean, I was sitting in the front row. David was sitting right next to me. We had the 2 highest grades in the class, and so we just goofed off the whole time, right in front of the teacher. She couldn't say a thing about it. So we're sitting there, and she says, she's right in front of me, she says, a molecule is every single one of its resonance structures at every point in time. Follow me so far? It's every one of its resonance structures, so electrons over here, both of those structures at the same time, but it's no single one of its resonance structures at any point in time. In other words, you can't stop the clock and say, oh, it's over here, now it's over here. You can't do that. So it's all of them all the time, none of them at any point in time. And I stopped, and I sat back, and I looked at her. And I said, if she can believe that about chemistry, what problem do I have with the Trinity? Let me unpack that for you for a second. There are certain things in science that we know to be true, but which are inexplicable at the macro level. This is one of them. Physics, we know light is both a particle and a wave. That makes no sense to physicists, but they know it's true. There are things that happen on the deeper levels of science that just do not fit our macro understanding. Why is it, then, that the Trinity poses such a problem when we can expect the one who created the world to be more complex than anything in it? Did you follow that? That was a non-committal, All right, that's fine. It's still not 11 yet. Another way that I looked at it was God created our minds, yes? If I can create a God that my mind can grasp, it probably isn't the right God. God is bigger than us. And I began to realize that no matter what objection I have to the nature of God, it is an inviolable objection. Unless there's an obvious contradiction, my objections are inviolable, because God must be larger than my comprehension. Now, is the Trinity a contradiction? No. How is it not a contradiction? What is the definition of a Trinity? God exists in one being and 3 persons. Now, if I were to say God was one being and 3 beings, that's a contradiction. If he was one person and 3 persons, that's a contradiction. He's one being and 3 persons. Well, what's the difference between a being and a person? I am a human being, right? That's my being. I'm a human. You have the same being. You're humans, right? But you have the same substance of being. You're humans. But my person, I'm Nabil. That's who I am. So my being is what makes me what I am, and my person is that which makes me who I am. Okay, God is one being. He's Yahweh. He's God. Magnificent creator. But his one being has 3 co-equal persons, Father, Son, and Spirit. There's no contradiction there. He's just much more complex than anything we've seen on this earth, and that's what we can expect.
I think Nabil was making the argument that there are certain things in theology that we don't understand, but we have good reasons for understanding a lot of it. Therefore, we have a basis for trusting that what we're told about what we don't understand is actually the case. So I don't think it's a confirmation bias. I think it's more of an extension. Just like you have good reasons for trusting what your parent or your teacher or your coach says because they've proven faithful over a number of years. Therefore, when they tell you something that doesn't make sense, you have good reasons to trust them for that. I think that's what he's going in here. And then the analogy on the physical chemistry part, it's I think he's saying what appears to be a contradiction in the physical world is not actually, because we observe what it is and we try to describe it in terms that we're familiar with. But those terms make it seem contradictory. So it's more of I think, an attitude of humility, where he's saying that physicists look at this phenomenon and say, we know that certain things are true because we can observe them. And according to our models of how it all fits together right now, that seems to be contradictory. But we know it's not. We don't know how. We need a new model. We just don't have one yet. The models that we have access to are imperfect. And so when it comes to the Trinity, first of all, just like Evan mentioned, we need to understand what the actual claim is so that we don't direct a straw man as an easy thing to criticize. But then realizing the limitations of our models. So the doctrine of the Trinity says that there is one God who subsists as three separate co-equal persons. Hank Hanegraaff characterized it, I think, a great way. It says one what and three who's. One what and three who's. So just be careful of trying to explain the Trinity and realizing that all of the analogies that we have are wrong. And some are actually heresies, like the one that says, well, God is like, three different people. Like he can be, a person can be a father, a husband, and a son at the same time. Okay? Well, that's actually describing the heresy of modalism. So just be careful when you're trying to describe this. You don't need to go too far. If you find yourself in a situation like that where you feel like, these people are telling me things or asking me questions or making assertions that I'm uncomfortable with because I don't know very much and I don't know how to deal with it, just remember two questions that you can ask. One is, what do you mean by that? Okay, so you can say, okay, you're telling me that this person appeared and was 125 years old. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by appeared? What do you mean by, just get more information. And the other is, how did you come to that conclusion? Why do you think they actually appeared? Did you see this with physical eyes? Did they leave footprints? So, what do you mean by that, and how did you come to that conclusion? And the reason why those questions are so good is because they put the burden of proof on the other person who is making the claim. If somebody makes a claim, they need to be prepared to support that claim with reasons. That's called the burden of proof. We do that too. If I'm saying Jesus is Lord, I need to be prepared to offer reasons why I think that's the case. And so if you're in a conversation with somebody who's making claims, and especially if you feel overmatched or you just don't have the knowledge to engage in discussion, just ask them questions. Clarify their point of view, and then find out what reasons they have for believing them.